Well, thanks for joining a new episode of Knowledge Basics. Today, we're learning about troubleshooting basic lighting. Hey, my name is Bruce Gilson, and welcome to our continued series on troubleshooting. If you haven't watched the video that talks about how to read basic prints, you're gonna wanna watch that video. We're building on those concepts as we move into troubleshooting. Now, troubleshooting is a series, and you might be watching the first video or the fourth video or the last. Just watch them all. You're gonna learn a lot, we hope, through the entire series. But today, we're talking about troubleshooting basic lighting. Light bulb! We've got a system here, and we've got our lighting console. Our lighting console can be communicating either ArtNet or it can be communicating DMX. We've got a DMX splitter. We're coming out of the DMX splitter via DMX, and we've got our lights. Now, as a quick review, our console is going to act as our input in this situation where the operator is inputting what they want to happen inside the console. Now, it's also doing some processing, right? Because it's taking that data and it's turning it into either ArtNet or DMX. And then that's going into, it's being distributed into our DMX splitter. DMX splitter is really just more part of the distribution process. And that's being distributed via DMX. And then our lights are our output. And so if you referred to those previous videos, you know what I'm talking about. The most common problem that you're gonna have in basic lighting systems is you're gonna have flicker. Flicker inside of one of your lights. Now, if you were a video guy, you think I might be talking about flicker, meaning a difference between the refresh rate of an LED light and the refresh rate of your camera. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm actually talking about visible flicker with the human eye, or like light noise happening everywhere, like your lights are just starting to strobe for no reason. That's the most common thing that happens when you're trying to troubleshoot a basic lighting system. Without getting too nerdy and technical, what's really happening when you have flicker is it's commonly broken down into two problems. Number one, you've got a fixture, a light fixture in your lighting chain that is in the wrong personality or profile or setting. Maybe it doesn't have the right DMX address. And when you have that happen, that can often cause digital noise to happen and cause all your lights to go crazy. So the easiest way to troubleshoot that, normally, if you've been watching this series, I've said start with the problem. Well, this is a challenge with lighting because normally all the lights flicker on that line of DMX. All of them are flickering. So you can't go, oh, this is the one.
Is this the one? Is this the one?
So this would be a case where you actually do need to start at the end and you're gonna work your way backwards. You're gonna unplug light 4. And if the problem stops with 1, 2, and 3, then great, you've identified that light 4 is your problem. If the problem continues, plug light 4 back in and then go to light 3. At light 3, unplug light 3 and 4 from 1 and 2. And if the problem stops, okay, great. Now we've identified that we've got a problem with light 3. And if that doesn't fix it, then rinse and repeat. Most likely what will happen is you will get to a place where when you unplug these lights, eventually a beginning portion of the chain is going to be working and you're going to identify where the problem starts, not necessarily where the problem is, but at least where the problem starts. So let's assume that we unplug light 3 and then light 1 and 2 start working properly. Well, now inside of light 3, I'm gonna actually check my fixture profile to begin with. I'm gonna make sure that it's got the right DMX address, it's in the right settings that's been set forth by the lighting designer, and that really the fixture is working the way that it's supposed to. I'm also going to unplug light 4. And then when I believe that light 3 is working, or it's at least set up properly, I'm gonna plug light 3 back in. And when I plug light 3 back in, I'm hoping that I've stopped the flicker between 1 and 2 and now adding 3. Once I've done that, then I'm gonna add light 4 back into the mix and see if I've solved the problem across the entire line. If I haven't solved the problem across the entire line, The next step I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add something that's called a terminator. Okay, so I told you that there's two normal problems that are with flickered lighting. Number one, you got a fixture that's in the wrong profile, and so we're trying to solve that problem. I'm gonna check that on light 3 and 4, right? But if I still have flicker, even though I'm confident that 3 and 4 are in the right settings, then I'm gonna grab something called a terminator. And not like the Terminator from the movies, but a lighting terminator. And so what does that actually mean? It's a little bitty device that it renormalizes your impedance back to 120 to 110 ohms. Now, why is that important? Well, lighting DMX is a digital signal, okay? Digital microplex is what it stands for. But it's a digital signal. The digital signal has to be within a range. I'm gonna give a range, and if you're an engineer nerd out there, you might think I got my range wrong. And this is like a basic range, nobody's measuring, but the point is between 75 and 130, okay, is the impedance range that it has to be in. When it drops below 75, it begins to flicker. Above 130, you might actually have communication problems, but that's the basic digital range that it's looking for. So that might be another thing that I'm gonna check. I'm gonna check and make sure that nobody that set up that lighting used the wrong type of cable, because if I've got a microphone cable right here, I'm gonna get rid of it, throw a DMX cable in, and hopefully that's gonna solve my problem as well. What the terminator does is the terminator reestablishes the ohm rating at 120 ohms, which is what you need for lighting. Now, the reason that the impedance might be changing is the lights themselves, especially cheaper lighting fixtures, they are going to steal a little bit of signal as they take the signal in and they repeat the signal back, and they take it in, they repeat it back, and they take it in and they repeat it back. They're gonna potentially cause the impedance to slowly begin to drop down the line. But so by putting a terminator in the end of the sequence, into the last light on the sequence, it allows that signal to get renominalized back to 120 ohms so that you've got the right resistance that you need across the chain, okay? So those are the two most common problems and the way that I'm gonna troubleshoot my lighting. Now let's say that I do all of that and I still have flicker. I could have a problem with my DMX splitter, or I could have a problem with my DMX line. So I'm gonna have to get a cable tester. I'm gonna have to test this DMX line and see if that DMX line tests out properly. I'm also going to, if I've got a DMX splitter, that typically means that I've got more than one lighting run. Are all of my lighting runs causing flicker? If they're all have flicker, then maybe I've got a problem inside my DMX splitter. Maybe I've got a bad unit, or maybe this connection is bad.
Might be a bad connection.
So I'm gonna use the same principles that we've discussed in other videos, where I'm gonna start where the problem is. It's a little bit more difficult to find, but once I rule out, yeah, it's not here, then I'm gonna slowly begin to work my way through the process and try to identify exactly where the problem is coming. There is a device that you can buy. We're gonna put a little picture of it right here. And that device will actually send DMX all by itself. So what I could do is I could unhook right here and put that device in line and rule this out. And if that device can send a DMX signal and there's no flicker, well, now I got a good idea. Now I've got a problem this direction. If that device gets plugged in here and you still have flicker, then that means that the problem is this direction. If I take the device and I replace the console and I put it right here and everything works fine, then maybe I've got a console problem. I will say in all my years, console problems are least likely. It doesn't mean that it doesn't happen, but your most common problem is gonna be with the lights like we talked about. The second most common problem is gonna be in your distribution, right? Especially if you and your team are the ones soldering these ends. You might have a bad solder, you got a problem there. So you wanna crack those XLR connectors and check your solder points and make sure that they all look good. I will also say that you're gonna have typically more problems if you're going console DMX to DMX splitter than if you go ArtNet. If you're going ArtNet from the console to the DMX splitter, normally that is fine. It either works or it doesn't work. It doesn't normally create flicker. All right. Well, this is the time of the video where I tell some stories about things that I've experienced in the field for those of you that learn best from Storytime. I got a couple of stories for you that are a little bit different than the basic stuff we covered in the first part of the video, a little bit more complex. But one of the stories is that we had done a lighting system inside of a bar, and it worked fine for 18 to 20 months, something like that. And then they called me one day and they said, hey, just, all of a sudden everything stopped working. So I went out there to try to figure out what was going on. And now we're dealing with a different issue. We're not dealing with like a flicker issue. We're dealing like all the lights are dead. In this particular example, we had used ArtNet. Now, this isn't a video about ArtNet, but ArtNet is a lighting protocol that runs over the network, to put it as simply as possible. And we had used ArtNet to do the installation, and all of a sudden, everything stopped working. When I showed up, the network switch inside my AV rack was a new network switch. It was not a network switch that I had installed. The lights weren't working, but all of them weren't working. So I went back to the source and it ends up being the network switch that wasn't provisioned correctly. Another one, I'm actually gonna go back to this slide. We installed a large system that was built into a stage design, okay? So we had embedded lighting inside of a stage design. So let's just assume that these lights are inside of like a set piece, okay? Instead of individual lights hanging off of a batten, these are set pieces. And we had designed it, and we had provided the equipment for it, but it was actually the stage design team were the ones that actually installed it into the stage design. And we had given them the wire diagram of how to hook everything up, but when they turned everything on, there was a ton of flicker. The way I addressed that flicker issue is I started checking all of my connection points and make sure that they wired up the light fixtures the way that we had designed them. And now we're not talking about a traditional like 3-pin XLR. We're actually talking about LED strip tape, and there are a lot of conversions into converter boxes. And inside of that, I began to discover that at some point they swapped the negative and the positive. And so the fixtures, by slowly taking one fixture out at a time, one element out at a time, I was able to discover when the problem stopped. Then when I discovered that the problem stopped, then I knew, okay, from here on, I've got something. I actually had to start taking apart the set design and figuring out where the problems were. And I found out that eventually somebody had swapped the red and the black wire, and now they were doing the opposite things, and we just created problems all the way down the line. So still similar process, right? As I'm like trying to figure out, okay, why is everything flickering? And I'm trying to rule out the problems. And I was taking my the like quick connect pieces that we had in the set pieces, taking them apart until we finally eliminated the flicker. And then I had to dive into the actual connections themselves. And typically, if you've been watching my videos, typically the problem is with your distribution, your connectors. You gotta wiggle and jiggle and make sure everything's correct, because that's the most human part of the process. And I'm not saying humans are bad.
Bad human.
I'm just saying that manufacturing typically has like standards and it typically goes well. Humans can create problems. All right. Well, I hope you feel like you're learning something. If you haven't watched the rest of the series, go watch the rest of the series. But if you are learning something, make sure you hit the like and the subscribe and get notifications. If you feel like I needed to say something a little bit differently or clarify something, put it in the comments and I'll get back to you as soon as I can.